Hey there, church. So excited to see you this morning or evening, wherever you may be watching us from. My name is Preston Waller. I'm the new student pastor here at Forest Park, and I'm so excited to be with you today. One of the things we want to encourage you, if you're new here this morning or this evening, is to go to a website called fplive.org/connect. And on that page, you'll be able to fill out a new here card that we encourage you to put in your information on. It not only allows us to get information from you, but it'll allow you to stay connected with everything that we're putting out on a weekly basis. You'll also find on that page our social media accounts, as well as Facebook groups that we have going on. And of course, it'll keep you updated with everything going on in Forest Park. So one of the very special things we have going on this week is directly following our Saturday evening worship service online, we have something new called Virtual Lobby Experience. And we encourage you to go to fplive.org/lobby for all the details about what it may entail. But what it's designed to do is to bring our lobby experience here at Forest Park to you virtually in your homes. And so what will happen is, directly following the service, you'll have a chance to interact with not only some of our pastors and leaders like Josh and Scott, but you'll also have a chance to interact with the community, our Forest Park Church family, virtually as well, so you can stay connected with one another and with our leaders. Again, if you want more information on that, go to fplive.org/lobby. So I'm excited to get into the rest of the service together. Our worship team has prepared a unique video for us today, so let's gather our family and friends and let's experience this together.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got my Waterbrook seniors in his hands. He's got my Waterbrook seniors in his hands. He's got my Waterbrook seniors in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the mommies and the babies in his hands. He's got the mommies and the babies in his hands. He's got the mommies and the babies in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the little bitty babies in his hands. He's got the little bitty babies in his hands. He's got the little bitty babies in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the little bitty babies in his hands. He's got the little bitty babies in his hands. He's got the little bitty babies in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the students and the teachers in his hands. Elementary, middle, and high school are in his hands. And all the exceptional children are in his hands. He's got everyone in his hands.
He's got the doctors and the nurses in his hands. He's got the doctors and the nurses in his hands. He's got the doctors and the nurses in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the first responders in his hands. He's got the EMTs in his hands. He's got police, fire, dispatch in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the nanas and the granddaddies. In his hands, he's got the momums and the pappies. In his hands, he's got the grandmas and the grandpas. In his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got you and your family in his hands. He's got you and your family in his hands. He's got you and your family in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands.
Wow, what an amazing job that Bill and the worship team did putting that together for us today. We want to continue to worship now through giving. And we understand at Forest Park that these are tough times for everyone, not just financially, but people's health and their well-being as well. And we want to make sure as a church that we're not only helping them financially, but we're praying with them, we're checking in on them, and we're providing meals for those who may need assistance. And one of the ways that you can partner with us in doing that for our community is by giving to Forest Park here. And so there are 3 ways that you can do that listed below. The first way is obviously you can mail in your donation to Forest Park. Another way you can do it is by going to fplive.org/giving. And then the last way, you'll see on the screen a number that you can text the word give to. And when you text the word give, it'll send you to Secure Give so you can give that way as well. So right now, Pastor Scott's coming to bring the message for us today, and we're in part 4 of our series, Things I'll Never Do Again. I know I've been blessed by this series. I know you have too. So gather your family and friends around the couch, get a Bible, get a snack, and let's enjoy it together.
Welcome, everyone, to our continuing series, Things I'll Never Do Again. This is part 4, and today I'm going to talk to you about never again will I remain stuck in my past. Now, hopefully you've got a notepad with you, your phone, an iPad, a computer, something to take notes with, because today you're going to want to get this information down so you can not only digest it yourself, but you can also share it with your family, with your friends, whether it's through social media or texting or whatever it is. We want to get this information to as many people as possible, and hopefully today's message will be practical and helpful and challenging all at the same time. Before we get into today's message, I do want to encourage you, if you do not use the YouVersion app, you should. It's helpful. Scriptures are there for you, a place for you to take notes in, etc. Now, if you've not been to the fplive.app site, go ahead and do so. It's very simple. Just fplive.app, fplive.app, and then you'll see message notes there. Click it, and then the YouVersion service is available for you right there, and you can follow along, etc. Also, before we jump into today's message, stay with us at the end of the message because we've got questions you can use to discuss today's content. So just hang around. At the end when I'm praying or I say thanks for joining us, there'll be click off and kind of go away. But don't do that. Just hang tight and you'll see questions come up on your screen. Then you can use them to talk about, again, today's message with your family. You can get on a Zoom call or something like that with your community group or with a variety of friends or whatever it is and talk about what you've learned today and begin to put it into practice. So go ahead and get what you need and be ready for this message, and let's jump into it. You know, one of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is a 1994 American magical realism drama film comedy directed by Robert Zemeckis. Most of you are familiar with the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, go see it. It is a perfect movie to watch during our quarantine. For those of you who are not familiar with the movie, Forrest Gump is a simple-minded man who tells the story of his life to whomever will listen while sitting at a bus stop. Some of his life experiences are common, some are superhuman. You find yourself laughing and crying throughout the entire movie. One episode takes place during the Vietnam War. Forrest has been flown into a combat zone where he meets Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan is a man's man. Every generation of his family had a man die in battle for his country. Lieutenant Dan had war hero in his blood, and he knew it. He was a proud man. He was a confident man. He couldn't lose. Whether he lived or he died, whatever it was, he was going to end up a winner. One day, Lieutenant Dan led his men into the jungle where they came under heavy attack, and one by one, his men were cut down by enemy fire. In a moment of superhuman strength, Forrest picked up each man and ran them out into a clearing where they were airlifted by a helicopter to a hospital. To his surprise, Forrest came upon Lieutenant Dan. His legs were ripped up by gunshots. Forrest went to pick him up, and Lieutenant Dan told him to leave him alone. He wanted to die a hero on the battlefield, not live as a cripple. Forrest had to make a tough choice. Do I leave him to die and preserve his pride, or do I save him, knowing Lieutenant Dan may hate me for the rest of his life? Forrest decided to save him. Forrest also took some bullets himself, landing both Lieutenant Dan and Forrest in the hospital to recover. One day, Forrest was resting in bed when a hand came up over the side of his bed, grabbed his bed shirt, and pulled him down to the ground. The hand was Lieutenant Dan's. Both of his legs had been amputated, and his face was filled with rage. As they lay there on the floor, Lieutenant Dan said this, and listen to what Lieutenant Dan screams or in passion talks to Forrest. He says this, "You listen to me. We all have a destiny. Nothing just happens. It's all part of a plan. I should have died out there with my men, but now I am nothing but a cripple, a legless freak." Then pointing to his leg stumps, he says to Forrest, "Do you see that? Do you know what it's like to not be able to use your legs?" And then Forrest said, "Yes, I do." Lieutenant Dan continued with his rebuke. "Do you hear what I said? You cheated me. I had a destiny. I was supposed to die in the field with honor. That was my destiny, and you cheated me out of it. Do you understand what I'm saying, Gump? This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to me. I had a destiny. I was Lieutenant Dan Taylor." And Forrest said, "You still, Lieutenant Dan." With a look of hopelessness, Lieutenant Dan concluded by saying, "Look at me. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do now?" Lieutenant Dan went from being a war hero in his mind to a legless freak. In an instant, his entire world changed. He went from honor to shame, from significance to worthlessness, from hero to freak. Suddenly, his life lost all meaning and purpose. He was damaged goods, a reject waiting for the garbage dump. Can you relate? Let me ask you a question. I want to get really personal with you, and I want you to be honest, and I want you to be transparent with yourself. What has happened to you that makes you feel like damaged goods? Something happened to you in your childhood? Maybe your first marriage fell apart, and you just feel like, who's going to want me? I'm just worthless. I'm just a broken mess. Did you experience a rape, and you still carry that trauma with you, and you feel so bruised and you feel so broken on the inside? Maybe it was a bankrupt business. You tried your absolute best, and it still fell apart. What happened to you that makes you feel like a failure? I picked up this diagram in my reading this past week in prepping for this message. And as you can see, at the top of the diagram, it says expectations. Life is filled with expectations. Expectations that others have for us, expectations we think God has for us, and expectations we have for ourselves. Here are a few expectations other people have for us. They expect that we will be responsible human beings. They expect that we'll be a loyal friend and a faithful family member, and we'll contribute to the family and help other people be their best. We are expected to be a valuable employee. And some of those are expectations that certainly are reasonable. Here are some expectations we believe God has for us. We think that God expects us to be generous and to be faithful and to be moral and to be a worshiper of Him and to attend church and to get into a group and to give our tithes and to live a moral life, etc. And then there are some expectations that we have for ourselves. All of the ones that I listed above, plus on top of it, we have expectations that we will be attractive, that we will be financially independent, that we'll be healthy, that we'll have the ideal weight, that we'll be intelligent, that we'll be funny and charismatic, and we'll be an amazing parent and sexually fulfilled and socially connected, and the list goes on and on. And when you add up all the expectations that other people have for us, and then all the expectations that we believe God has for us, and then all the expectations that we have for ourselves, the weight of expectations can be quite heavy. But the reality is, we don't live up to half of those expectations. We might have them all kind of, balanced out for a few days or maybe even a couple of weeks, but as soon as we fix one or meet one expectation, we seem to fail at another expectation. The reality and the expectations are often quite different. In reality, we fall short. Paul the Apostle tells us in his letter to the Roman Christians in the first century, he said, all have missed the target, the ideal, and fallen short of God's perfection. You fall short, I fall short, we all fall short. Now, if you are emotionally healthy, well-connected, spiritually mature, you accept the reality of falling short, and you either lower your expectations or you decide to work harder, but overall, it's not that big of a deal. You manage it. You manage the tension between expectations and reality. You accept the fact that you meet some expectations and you don't meet other expectations. But for many of us, it is a huge deal when we don't meet the expectations others have for us, or we think God has for us, or we have for ourselves. Falling short of God's expectations or the expectations of others, for some of us, devastates us. And when we fall short, our response, and this is really important that you understand this part, so hopefully I'll explain it clearly. When we fall short of these expectations we believe others have, God has, and we have for ourselves, we often feel shame. We personalize our failure as a statement on our worth, and we allow our failure to define us. Now let me say that again because it's very important that we get this point. We personalize our failure as a statement on our worth and allow our failure to define us, and we feel shame. Somewhere in life, we begin to believe our performance determines our worth. And so if we aren't performing well, our value is diminished, like right now. Many of you do not feel as if you're performing well. I mean, how can you perform well when we're stuck at home, when we're in quarantine, when we're told to, stay socially distanced from each other? We're unable to work with all the restrictions and cancellations. Some of us have lost our jobs. Some of us have been laid off, and we're not sure when we're going to go back to what it is we've been trained to do. We're professionals. We've given years of our lives to hone in on these skills, and we can't do them right now. We can't perform. We can't function, and we don't know what the future looks like. How are we going to get our bills paid? How are we going to take care of all the needs we have out there? And I'll be honest with you, I feel some of that right now. Not to the level many of you do, but within my little world, I feel some of that as well, the pinch of that, the tension of that. I've got some uncertainty going on in my heart and in my mind. I mean, here are just some of the things that maybe you've not thought about that I think through almost every day over these last 3 weeks. Can we do online church well? I mean, how do we bring these teachings to you in a way that engage you? And how do we do? Our band is amazing, and all the music that they work on and all those things. And will we be effective? I wonder about that. Will people even watch? Will people keep financially supporting, even though they're not gathered in the building every week? And even more important things, how are we going to minister effectively while keeping our distance from people? What about people who are sick? What about people who are in the hospital? What about this? What about that? What if and what if? I do a lot of what ifing. How about you? I've had a lot of what ifing going on through my mind and heart over these last few weeks. And I've been asking myself this question, especially as I was preparing for this message. Why am I what ifing so much? I am because, I'll be honest with you, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that if things do not work out the way that I want them to work out, maybe my value will be lowered. Maybe I won't be an effective pastor. What if I'm not as good as the other pastors that any of us could watch online anytime and who do online church and online services really, really well? What if I don't have the money to keep everything going strong for weeks to come? What if people don't give? What if people don't watch? What if people don't support? Now, for many of you, that might sound somewhat silly or trivial because that's not your world. You don't think about those things. You think about those things, however, in your context, and you wonder, what about my car payment? And what about my house payment? And what if I can't see my parents? Or what if I can't travel and go see my extended family? And what if my grandfather gets sick? Or what about my parents? On and on it goes. And at the heart of these questions I'm asking, and at the heart of many of the questions you're asking, here it is: what if we fail? And I know a lot of you have that question floating around in your heads right at this moment. What if I fail to pay my bills? What if I fail as a husband? What if I fail as a salesman? What if I fail to make my car payment? What if the stress takes over so much and I fail to stay sober? What if I return to the drugs? What if I return to those addictions that I thought I was overcoming? And all that fear is just rolling around in your head and in your heart. And there is a word for all this what ifing. And at first, we might think the word is fear. In fact, when I first began to work through this message, that's what I thought. I thought, well, we're doing all this what ifing simply because we're afraid. We're fearful. And that is true. We are afraid. And we have a lot of those concerns and worries that are bouncing around in our heart, bouncing around in our head. But I've learned something. It's much deeper than that. It's deeper than fear. Yes, we are afraid. But why are we afraid? Why are we afraid? In other words, what are we afraid of? And here it is: shame. We are afraid of shame. Shame is the word describing the feelings and experiences of those of us who are afraid right now. Now you might say, shame? Scott, I'm not really connecting how we're what-ifing and shame. I mean, it seems to be a straight line from the what-ifing and fear, but I'm not really sure how shame is brought into that. Well, hopefully I'll do a good job. If things do not work out, if I lose my job, if you lose your job, if we can't pay the bills, if we get drunk, if, and you can fill it in with a litany of lots of what ifs. Here's the truth. We will feel like a failure. We will be embarrassed. We will feel worthless. And I feel that way because I've attached my value to what I do, what I drive, where I live, what people think of me, my comforts, my status, my reputation, my position in the community. As a pastor, maybe I attach my value to a full auditorium and people giving weekly and coming out into the lobby and seeing all the different people. I've had to think through a lot of these things. And each of these things confirm our value, our worth. And we are afraid, yes, but it goes deeper. We are afraid we will lose those things and we will begin to feel the pains of shame. And here is where I need to do a really good job with explaining this, because I need to pivot this message, and hopefully I can keep everybody on the truck, if you will, as I turn the corner and we can all get to the final destination here. Many of us have real difficulty staying home right now and not working and spending a lot of time alone. And we have difficulty with it because at the core of who we are ashamed of ourselves. And we work, and we do, and we perform in an effort to prove to ourselves and to others we are worthy. We put things on social media, and we take pictures of ourselves, and we get out and we go to work, and we do our thing. We stand on the stage, and we preach sermons, and we sing in the band, and we do a lot of things. And in essence, what we're doing is, look at me. Value me. Pay attention to me. I work out. I've lost weight. Look at what I drive. Look at what I do. Look at my wife. Look at my husband. Look at my degrees. Look at my status. And when all the busy stops and we sit alone, we have to look at ourselves. And we're not performing for anybody. And no one's applauding us. And no one's patting us on the back. And no one's telling us how amazing we are. And when we sit alone and we think about ourselves and we kind of get into our little place where there's not a lot of other voices, we start to feel a lot of shame. And believe it or not, all of this is connected to our past. Shame over what we've done. Shame over what we're doing. And because of what we've done, or what we're doing, shame over what we might do, fail. You see, a few of us feel so much shame today because of what people did to us yesterday. Or we feel shame today over what we've done yesterday. Or we feel shame today because we are fearful we're going to go back and do those things again tomorrow. Brene Brown quotes a number of people describing how shame felt to them. Listen to these quotes from people who described shame to her. They said, one person said, "Shame is getting laid off and having to tell my pregnant wife. Shame is having someone ask me, 'When are you due?' when I'm not pregnant. Shame is hiding the fact that I'm in recovery. Shame is raging at my kids. Shame is bankruptcy. Shame is my boss calling me an idiot in front of the client. Shame is not making partner. Shame is my husband leaving me for my next door neighbor. Shame is my wife asking me for a divorce and telling me that she wants children, but not with me. Shame is my DUI. Shame is infertility. Shame is telling my fiance that my dad lives in France when in fact he's in prison. Shame is internet porn. Shame is flunking out of school twice. Shame is hearing my parents fight through the walls and wondering if I'm the only one who feels this afraid. What does shame feel like for you? I mean, if you filled in the blank, what would you say? Shame is what? And that feeling of shame is miserable. I hate shame. And when I spend a long time alone, when I'm kind of cloistered, all by myself, and I don't have people to perform for, and I don't get a lot of the applause and a lot of the pats on the back, and I sit alone and I think about my past. And I think about failures. And I think about what I've done and the struggles that I have. Boy, that shame begins to just bubble up. And here's something I've learned, and I'm hopeful I can help you with this. Here's the deal. I didn't even know that I was feeling shame for years. I actually thought I was feeling guilt over sin and conviction for doing wrong things. And I thought my conscience was bothering me because I was so messed up. I literally thought I was feeling God's Spirit. And for years, I'm talking about a couple of decades, I walked around with shame, thinking it was God speaking to me. No. I was feeling shame from a warped view of God, from a confused childhood, from insecurities, and a twisted understanding of what it means to be human. My present was so screwed up because of my past. And even though I was living in 2015 or 2017, a large part of my mind and heart remained in 1978, 1986, or whatever. And I wonder about some of you. I mean, here you are in 2020, but I wonder, where do you remain stuck? How far back? 10 years? 20 years? For some of you, you are stuck 40 years ago. And I want to see you experience what you need to experience for you to break free from all of that and walk into today, walk into tomorrow without the burden of your past. So let's get very practical for the balance of this message. I'm going to give you some information, some practical ideas, a couple scriptures I'm going to throw at you, and I want you to process this as much as you can and then talk about it among your family, talk about it with friends, get on a Zoom call, whatever you could do, and process this information. Very quickly, let me give you some simple things you can do to begin to walk away from your past. First of all, here's the problem with dwelling on the past, okay? First of all, you miss out on the present. Some of us are so stuck in yesterday, all our regrets, our stupid decisions, the money we've wasted, the sins we've committed yesterday. The truth is, we're not present today. We're here, but we're not here. We're stuck in all the stuff that happened yesterday. Number two, you can't prepare for the future when you're stuck in the past. Listen to me very carefully, okay? This is going to hurt some of us. The future of your children is being negatively impacted by your past. Let me be clearer. For some of you, you carry your past with you so much, your past becomes your children's past. It's time to let it go. Your kids deserve their own good, healthy past, not your messed up, broken one. And when you drag your past with you and you're stuck in your past, your kids actually begin to experience your past as well. And it's messing up generations to come. Number three, dwelling on your past doesn't solve anything. Thinking about yesterday, dwelling on your mistakes, grieving the loss of relationships, friendships, etc. doesn't solve any of it, but it does ruin you, your kids, your future, your business, your peace, your joy, everything. So Scott, what do we do? Well, as simple as I know how to say it, we got to shift our thinking. We've got to shift it. Now, I assure you that is much easier to say than it is to do. And I don't believe that a person can merely shift his or her thinking by just an act of the will, and it's just as simple as, well, just change the way you think. There are many things at play, many realities at play, many bruises and cuts and wounds of our soul that makes it difficult, more difficult, I should say, for some people than for others. But here are a few things you can do to get started. All right? Very simple. First of all, schedule a time to think about your past. That might sound somewhat silly, but rather than thinking about your past throughout the day or whenever you see someone who reminds you of your past and you just fall into the hole and you sit there and think about your past and all the regrets and you grieve for an hour or two or the whole day, stop that. Think about your past for a while and move on. You know what? Heard a song today, or I saw someone in the store, or I saw a movie, or something happened and it reminded me of my past. I'm going to give about 15 minutes to this, reflect on it, and I'm moving on. And here's a big thing you can do. Focus on the lessons you've learned. So in that 15-minute period when you're thinking about your past, rather than just kind of, letting that happen for 15 or 20 minutes and then you try to move on. No. You're much smarter than you think you are. You've learned a lot from the failures, mistakes, sins, and all those things. Write down a few of those lessons you've learned. And then it goes into number 3, look at the situation differently. Now that you've processed that, look at it differently. Okay, I thought about this for a while. I've written down a few lessons I've learned, and now I'm going to view my past and my present and my future differently as a result of what I've learned. Now, let's look at some eternal truth before we wrap up today. Paul the Apostle in Philippians chapter 3, 12 through 14. Listen to what he says. This is so powerful and beautiful. He says, it's not that I have already reached this goal or have already been perfected, but I pursue it so that I may grab hold of it because Christ grabbed hold of me for just this purpose. Brothers and sisters, I myself don't think I've reached it, but I do this one thing. I forget about the things behind me and reach out for the things ahead of me. The goal I pursue is the prize of God's upward call in Christ Jesus. I don't have time to get into this today, but Paul had a lot of regrets. Paul did a lot of things in his past that he regretted. And if he dwelled on those past things he did, especially as he began to meet Christians and as he began to grow spiritually, he would have been filled with shame. But he said, I've got to let go of the past and press into the future. What do you need to let go of? And what do you need to pursue in your relationship with God? One more scripture here. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Paul goes through a long list of destructive behaviors and the kind of people who live opposite of God's ways. And then he wraps it up by saying this. This is what some of you used to be. He's just honest. This is how you guys used to live. That was your past. But, and I love scriptures that have but right in the middle of them. Why? Because everything turns. That's who you used to be. But you were washed clean. Look at this. You were made holy to God, and you were made right with God in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and the Spirit of our God. He doesn't just act like the past didn't happen. He acknowledges the past, and he says, yeah, you guys were jerks. Some of you did this and this and this, and you lived destructive lives. But now you're washed, you're clean, you're holy. The past acknowledged, the future planned. Now, I want to give you the word to process if you ever hope to move past your past, all right? And the word is forgiveness. We will never slip free from our past until we offer ourselves and other people forgiveness. Here's what I know. And I know this not only because I've read it and studied it, I know it because I've had to live it. The most difficult person you will ever have to forgive is you. The most difficult person you will ever have to forgive is you. Maybe you had an abortion when you were younger, and you live in shame today because of it. Maybe you went through a rebellious period of your life and you said things to people, you did things to people, maybe your parents, maybe your kids, I don't know. Maybe your first wife or husband. Maybe you physically hurt someone in some way. Maybe you found yourself wrapped up in an affair and blew your life up. Maybe you were in the military and you can't get out of your mind the things that you saw and the things you did. Maybe you were involved in an accident that seriously injured someone. Maybe you made some bad decisions in a difficult relationship and you left hurting people everywhere. If so, here's something that you must understand, okay? You can't authentically extend forgiveness to anyone until you first extend it to yourself. You can't give someone what you don't have. As it comes to you, it can flow through you and onto other people. But if you don't accept it yourself and you don't process it yourself, you'll never be able to give it to anyone else. Until then, every word about forgiveness is hypocritical. Not to the people you're offering forgiveness to, but to your own heart, because you don't believe it. You'll talk about forgiveness, but you yourself have never given it to yourself. You've never received it, so you can't give what you don't have. How can you truly forgive someone else if you don't believe forgiveness is extended to you? Here are some eternal truths as we finish out this message today. This is a series in and of itself. These things I'm going to give you right here, in and of itself would be a series, and a powerful, wonderful series, and maybe we'll do it one day. But these are 5 things I'm going to give it to you real quick, and I want you to process this and talk about this among yourselves. First of all, this is the power of forgiveness. First of all, the story and characters and drama of the Bible rest on a foundation of forgiveness. In other words, everything in the Bible rests on a foundation of God's forgiveness. I love this quote by Brian Zahn. He says, without forgiveness, the Bible doesn't get past Genesis. Think about that. We screwed everything up at the very beginning, and the only reason we moved on was because God was merciful and kind and compassionate. Everything else is built on a foundation of forgiveness at the very beginning of this entire unfolding drama of God and us humans. Number 2, you're already forgiven. It's not that you have to earn forgiveness or climb up a ladder and ring the bell and then eventually you'll get Listen, you're already forgiven. God has already forgiven you. It's not about earning it. It's not about proving your worth. It is a matter of accepting it. Number 3, and I love this. People a lot more sinful, perverted, confused, and lost than you have been forgiven. No matter what you've done, there are people who've done it 10 times more. No matter what you've thought, there are people who think a lot more perverted than you. No matter what you've said, no matter what you've done, there are people who've done it in worst ways and done it longer than you, and they have received forgiveness. And if all those folks can get forgiven and experience forgiveness, you can too. Number 4, everything Jesus did and accomplished guarantees your forgiveness. When he was on the cross and he said, "It is finished," that's what he meant. It is finished. Your forgiveness is guaranteed. And the last one is my favorite. And after this, we're going to pray and we're going to be finished with today's message. And here it is. He has more forgiveness than you have sin. No matter how much sin you've committed, no matter how much sin of your past is there or your present, his forgiveness is greater than all of that. Here's what I imagine, okay? I imagine us we imagine yourself at the worst. Okay, you have screwed it up. You've done everything wrong, the most gross, the most perverted, the most ugly thing that you've done. And you pile every single bit of it up into this heaping, stinking lump of sin. And you just pick it all up and it's heavy and you carry it to God and you lay it down in front of him. And then you turn your head and there is a Mount Everest of forgiveness. There is a massive, massive mountain of forgiveness that your eye cannot even see the top of. He has more forgiveness than you have sin. And after you take all of that and you lay it down in front of him and you confess every single thing you've ever done, you've confessed every sin, every ugly thing, and you think you have really you've shocked God, you have really impressed him with all your sin. He looks at you and says, "Is that all you got?" Is that all you got? Because I have more forgiveness than you have sin. Hey, that's good news. If you want to walk out of your past, you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to look at it. You're going to have to gather it up. You're going to have to bring it to Him. And you're going to have to deal with the shame that has been caused because of it. And you're going to lay it at His feet. And there is forgiveness for all of it. And you can walk free. Would you, right where you are, will you pray with me? Maybe you're there with your family and you can reach over and take the hand of your spouse, or maybe your kids are there and you can just bow your head and you can pray along with me. And listen, it's possible that you've never received this forgiveness because you've never understood it, or you didn't think you were worthy of it, or whatever. And today, for the first time, it's clicked. And you see that there is so much forgiveness for your past, and you don't have to live in trapped anymore. Right where you are, join with me in a word of prayer. Father, we bring ourselves to you. All of our sin, all of our mistakes, all of the mess ups and screw ups of life, all of our past, as ugly and putrid as it is. And Father, many of us are afraid right now. We're walking in shame, and all this quiet time we're spending is stirring up a lot of insecurities and a lot of things that have held us back for years. God, we just bring it all to you and we lay it down at your feet, knowing that you have more forgiveness than we have sin. You have more mercy and grace and compassion than we have shame and failure. Father, remind everyone who's listening about your love for them, your grace for them, your kindness for them, your compassion for them. Wash and cleanse and renew and make us new. We thank you, and we ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. The questions will be on the screen. You can work your way through this message today, talk about it, and learn some more. And we'll see you again soon.